All right, so again, as a quick agenda, we're first going to cover just overall what Airtable is. Second being, what are the parts of the product that we're going to focus on? And then finally, like we said, how to use Airtable for project management. So what is Airtable? It's honestly a hard question to answer sometimes, but at a high level, Airtable is a flexible database that you can use to basically build your own custom applications. And I think, to really understand why that's valuable, it's really helpful to understand, basically how software works overall. If you look at a lot of applications, oftentimes, you can classify them as, database products with different interfaces layered on top of them. And, what Airtable has tried to do is really take away all of the complexity that it takes to really build your own applications by providing interfaces that people are familiar working with. So whether it looks like a spreadsheet or whether it looks like a calendar or maybe stacked cards that you can use to organize statuses and understand where things are at in your pipeline. All tools that we're already familiar working with, but now we've added the relational component of being able to actually create relationships between whatever information you're organizing and use that to your advantage in whatever we're building. And so we'll dive in a little bit more about what that specifically means for project management and how you can use that. But at a high level, that is what Airtable is. So the way that it works is that we actually provide you a lot of the components of what it takes to build your own application. And so as opposed to Airtable basically, being a prepackaged solution that, defines how you work, we provide more of this, Lego kit approach where you can take parts of, different applications and put them together to create whatever you'd like in your own way. So as an introduction to Airtable, I think there's just some high-level things that are going to be really helpful for us to understand as we're going through this example. First is, again, for organizational purposes. So Airtable is organized into what we call workspaces and bases, where a workspace is essentially a folder to house all of the different bases that you create in Airtable. A base is any specific application that you build in Airtable. And one of the things that you notice about Airtable, even in this workspace example, is that you can use the same software to accomplish a variety of different goals. We've really built Airtable in a way that ideally helps you create your process in Airtable. So whatever process you're imagining, today we're going to be focusing on project management, you can create an Airtable. And that's going to be the goal, is that you can really use it to do whatever you'd like. A base, which is just our nomenclature for a database, is basically any collection of information that should be related, and whether it's a specific workflow like a marketing and editorial calendar, or whether it is something like an applicant tracking system, maybe a deal management CRM. All of these could be different use cases of Airtable, which kind of is a base. Hopping into a base, there are really some other organizational components that will be helpful for us to understand. The first is going to be a table. Now, this is going to differ a little bit from the ways people might be used to work. So a table, think of it as that single source of truth for one type of information. And, taking a step back, oftentimes when we're speaking with clients, one of the biggest challenges that we hear is that, ideally you have one place to put all your information that everybody can kind of zoom in or zoom out of at whatever level they need to based on their priorities. And so oftentimes a lot of the tools that we have at our disposal aren't really able to accommodate everyone, because either you are, messing up somebody else's view when you add your own filters, or maybe it's not as robust and feature rich as you need it to be to really extract the level of value that you need. And so tables are that actual single source of truth for whatever type of information you're organizing. And then you can actually create different views of each of the tables that you make, such that everybody can have their own cut of that information. And so if I just want to look at things that have my name on them and filter out everything else, I can do that. If somebody else wants to organize the fields in a different way or different format, they can do that. So there's a lot of different ways that you can organize this. And we'll hop in to show you a little bit more about how that works. But table is that first organizational unit. Next, you'll see fields. These are basically the different attributes of whatever you're organizing in Airtable. And so as you can see here, and we'll show a little bit more, you can have a lot of different field types. And these are basically, like I said, either the attributes, or maybe some people are familiar with the term metadata of whatever main item you're tracking. So whether it's the status, or whether it's the owner of a project, or the channels that a particular piece of content is going to. These are all the different attributes of which you're organizing an Airtable in a very structured and organized way. Last is going to be a record. A record is essentially a row of information in Airtable. And the reason we call it a record is because it is an actual unit of information, as opposed to just disparate data that is not related. So in Airtable, we understand that your project, project A, is owned by a certain person and in a particular status and has a start date and a due date. And all of that information can be packaged in a way that you can leverage it across your entire base that you've created. And so that is why we call it a record, and we'll see kind of the utility of that as we continue. So again, just hopping in here. So we'll talk about some of the fields there, and some of the field types, and we'll see how all of these can kind of sum up to create whatever application we need to build. And so what I'll do now is hop out of our slides and hop right into Airtable. So again, when we take a look at Airtable, this is a project tracker that we've set up with the scenario where we are the project manager, and there's a lot of challenges that we face in organizing all of our work. One is just, again, the ability to put everything in one place and have everybody in our sphere have the level of visibility that they need to get their work done. So for me as a project manager, my main priority is making sure that I can make the lives of my team easier by helping them understand which tasks are assigned to them. I also have stakeholders that I need to focus on and make sure that they have the level of visibility that they need to understand, how we're tracking towards our strategic priorities. And currently, with a spreadsheet environment, I'm able to put everything in one place, but it doesn't have the level of visibility that it needs for me to really effectively do everything. And what winds up happening oftentimes is that instead of everybody kind of working in one place, people essentially create their own trackers that they're updating kind of in a vacuum or in a silo. And we don't really ever reconcile any of those changes because that information isn't synced up across anywhere. And so now we have less visibility, and that just leads to us moving slower as an organization, spending a lot of time playing catch up, and we're looking to alleviate that issue. And so the way that we could do that in Airtable is kind of this setup here. So like we said, each table here is going to be the single source of truth for whatever main type of information we're tracking. So we can see we have a table for our initiatives, which are maybe like our high-level strategic priorities, a separate table for our projects, and then maybe a separate table for our tasks. And we have a couple other ones as well. And we'll look at how we can strategically use each of these to give us the level of visibility that we need to track and organize our projects. So the first thing you'll notice is that when we hop in here, Airtable is going to look relatively familiar. It starts off looking like a spreadsheet, which a lot of us currently use to organize our work. Even me, until I got here. So over here on this left-hand column, these are all of the records that we're organizing, right? So these are our actual projects. So each of these items on the left-hand side represent one of those projects. Each of these other columns, which we call fields, these are the other attributes like we were talking about before. And so whether it's a tag for just who owns a particular project, or a category, or whatever clients the project's related to, the start and due dates, other attributes that we care about that are all custom built to ours. And the thing about Airtable is, again, none of these things are determined by Airtable. We're able to truly define what those are. And so, for example, if your internal nomenclature has a different name for what you call your teams, you can always come in here and easily update it to be whatever you like it to be, and have that level of flexibility. And so you'll see that as your processes and projects evolve over time, Airtable can help you evolve with that, as opposed to being a more static program that can't really flex and bend to the ways that your business and challenges flex and bend. And so the first place we'll start is kind of understanding how everybody can, again, put everything in one place now start having different views of that information that are specific to them. So the first thing that we can see is that my team, I have 3 people currently. I have Ari, Bailey, and Cameron. Now, for me as a project manager, it's really helpful to understand the view of all of their projects and have that level of visibility. So maybe something easy for me to do would be to come up here to the Airtable toolbar, which gives me the ability to start customizing any views of any table that I make to be specifically tailored to what I want them to be. So you see I have the ability to hide things that are irrelevant for me, the ability to filter out things that are more relevant or less relevant. I can start creating rules essentially within my base for the types of information that I want to see. The ability to group information. So basically, what if I want to bucket it just for visual purposes to help me fully understand what is falling under what categories? Also sorting, coloring, and more. And so this toolbar helps you essentially customize any view that you create to be what you want it to be. So for me as a project manager, it might be really helpful for me to see which projects are organized by the overall project lead. So now in a very easy way, I can see, oh, these are the ones that Ari's working on. I can now have a little bit more visibility and understanding the different statuses that those are. If some things are more relevant or less relevant to me, I can start, maybe customizing this view to say, only show me the fields that are relevant for me that I am currently focused on. And so we'll see that we can start customizing these views, again, to be what we need them to be, just starting with this view for me. For my team as well, it's probably going to be helpful for them to understand kind of what's on their plate. And so when I come over here, I can see, Ari prefers actually viewing her projects more in this stacked card format, this Kanban format. And what we can see here is similar to what we just did with the grid view, we can now start customizing this view to be exactly what Ari needs it to be. Now, the key point that you want to make here is, again, understanding that, again, if the goal is to have one place where all of our information lives, but be able to break out different views of that information that can be relevant for our projects, it's really helpful to understand that this view of our projects is the same information that we just saw on this grid. And so again, if we come back up to these projects, we'll notice that any edits that we make will update everywhere else that record exists, but we can change the visualization of that to be whatever we'd like it to be based on what our priorities are. And so when I come over here to Ari's view, maybe Ari doesn't necessarily care about all of these different projects. She only wants to look at the projects that are relevant for her. So maybe we'll add a filter where the project owner is going to be Ari. And so if I come to here and just organize where the project lead is Ari, automatically what we'll see is that every project that wasn't owned by her is instantly filtered out. Now, these records weren't deleted or anything like that. We just created a view of our projects that is specifically filtered for what Ari cares about. And now the benefit of that is that, one, Ari doesn't have to worry about projects that aren't on their plate. And two, they won't mess up the view of somebody else by editing information that they weren't supposed to be editing. And so as Ari updates her projects, maybe she actually realized that this business card project wasn't a visual design, it was actually production. So as she moves this over, what we'll notice is that when we come back to that higher level and we come to the business cards, the status of it, the team that owns it was actually moved as well, because again, we all updated the same record and not just some copy of it. Usually if you were trying to accomplish something similar, you would have had to make a duplicative copy of this information. Ari would update it on her own. Then hopefully Ari would have, reconciled those changes back to the master document. Whereas in Airtable, you actually just need to make the change once. You don't need to duplicate the information in any way, shape, or form. And all of those updates proliferate everywhere else that those records exist. And so now you have a lot less duplication of effort and a lot more visibility, confidence, and clarity that when people make changes, it's going to be reflected everywhere else. We'll see the same thing with Bailey's view. So Bailey decided that, again, they only care about projects that are in some particular categories, in this case, packaging design and brand identity. And for them, they also don't care about most of the fields that we have, which is great. Oftentimes, teams are very focused on the things that are specifically in their corner of the universe. And they want to be able to make sure that, they can update what they need to update without disrupting things that are irrelevant for them. And so the ability to actually hide fields for review, or maybe change, which columns are organized in which particular order so that they can be more effective for you, is going to be really valuable. And so, one of the benefits there is that, now since we've hidden these 17 fields, Bailey actually won't update them because they're irrelevant for them. And so anytime that Bailey needs to update their information, they can do that very easily. And then finally, for Cameron, it looks like Cameron prefers to organize his information on a calendar. And again, these are the same exact projects that we saw before, but now we can start to get to the idea that you can customize every view and every view type to be exactly what you'd like it to be, whether it's filtered a certain way, colored a certain way, organized a certain way, grouped a certain way. All of these views can be visually what you need them to be, but all of the updates, roll back up to everywhere else that they're supposed to. And so in this example, let's say that Cameron has a kickoff date and a due date for Cameron's projects. When I change the due date in one place, let's say the homeowner's guide actually isn't due on April 4th, it was actually due on April 5th. Again, when I come back up to that higher level view and I look at that project for Cameron, we'll see that that date was updated to where it's supposed to be. And so again, that's the main idea, is that all of the edits that we make can roll back up to wherever they're supposed to be, and but everybody can view them however they'd like. So that's going to cover some of the basics of just organizing your tables, making sure that you have an understanding of what types of information you're trying to organize. This particular table is going to be organizing our projects. Then understanding, what are all the attributes that we care about organizing as it relates to our projects. So whether it's the statuses, whether it's the categories, the project owners, those kinds of things. Now we can start to get into a little bit more of additional value that teams can see. And this kind of comes back to that idea of Airtable being able to actually relate information across your bases. And so for my projects, there are certain things that are linked to it, like tasks, where I can say these tasks actually roll up to a particular project. And so for my teammates, now if they need more visibility into kind of what's on their plate, they can come to this task table and understand everything that they kind of have to do. And so, for example, we can see we have tasks A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, and these are all related to specific projects that people are working on. And so again, the reason that we broke this table out from the projects table is that a task and a project are two different types of information. And so it wouldn't necessarily make sense to track them on the same place, but they are related in a certain way. And so we want to be able to signify that relationship. The way that we can do that in Airtable, one of the field types that we have is called a linked record. And so we can see that we can actually signify that relationship between projects and tasks by linking them together. Now what this does is it enables us to access all the information from one table in another relative to whatever we link. And so what that means is that, if I come to the lab logo project and I say that project A, or the task A, is also related to that one, I can now start accessing the information from task A in the projects table. And so, as I'm updating my tasks, again, it would likely be helpful for everybody to have a view of, what tasks are helpful for them. And so we can now start to do some of that work here as well, where similar to what we just did on the projects, now everybody can start to have their view of whatever tasks are associated with them. And so, again, the biggest challenge for my team is, them knowing kind of what's on their plate and what they still have to do. And so one thing that we'll maybe do is, for all of our tasks, Ari really cares about only knowing the things that have yet to be completed. So we'll maybe add another filter here where the status is only things that are kind of in play. So Ari only wants to see things that are either not started or in progress, and also assigned to them. Great. So now Ari has this view of basically her in progress tasks. So now anytime something moves from one status to another, it'll immediately fall off of her plate because it may fall outside of those criteria that we just set. And so when I come over here and let's say Ari does what she needs to do for task A, once she completes it, we'll see that it no longer is in any of the first two statuses. It's now completed. So now it's no longer in this view. And so she knows that she no longer needs to worry about it. Again, the task wasn't deleted or anything like that. Rather, it was just filtered out of this view because it doesn't fit those specific filter rules that we set. And so now as you're organizing your tasks for everybody can kind of keep a running list of everything that's going on their plate. Again, viewed how they'd like to view it. Similarly, it looked like some teams, like to view their tasks just on more of this, card style through a Kanban board. And so again, as things move in and out, people can stay very organized about what they'd like to do and where their projects and tasks sit. And so this would help us, again, organize all of our tasks and understand where things are in our pipeline. And so now, for my visibility, if I need to understand, how many projects or tasks my teammates are working on, I can now start to do that in a much more efficient way. So, if I come to my teammates table, and again, I've organized all of my teammates to see kind of what's on their plate, which projects that they're associated with, I can now see, okay, we ideally have people working on at a maximum of 3 projects. It looks like each person is, linked to 3 already. It actually looks like Cameron, who should only be working on 1 project, is actually overstaffed. And so now I have that level of visibility to say, maybe I shouldn't be putting things on Cameron's plate because Cameron is a little bit overworked at this point. And so again, making sure that we can understand all of this in one place is going to be really helpful for us as we continue organizing the different projects that we have. Now, my teammates who kind of report up to me are just one of the sets of people who I'm responsible for providing visibility to. I also have some of my executive stakeholders who don't necessarily care about all of the nuances of the specific project and task details, but they need to know basically the roll-up of how these things are working so that they can have their view of whatever makes the most sense for them. And so as an example, in my view, I would care about all of these specific fields for all of my projects, but for my executives, they might care about something different. They might want to say, I need to organize my projects by, the overall impact of how it's going, right? So we've just quickly grouped these projects by the overall project impact, whether it's a low or a high impact project. And again, all of these additional fields might be a little bit of noise for them. And so for them, they might only want to see, whether a project is over or under budget, what's the overall impact of that project, and who do I need to get in touch with in case something is not going according to plan. And so in this example, we could have this executive view that they could either log into here, or we could create like a shared link or an embedded link where we could say, hey, for my executive, just bookmark this link, or we can embed this on our internal wiki so that they can always stay up to date with the view of whatever they care about. And now they have the ability to quickly see at a glance, it looks like our homeowner's guide and our pattern projects are over budget. Maybe they need to get in touch with Ari or Bailey to make sure that they know what's going on. And they can do a lot of that work directly in Airtable. And so whether it's simply, mentioning them and saying, hey, Bailey, what is the update on here? You can have all of that activity happen in Airtable so that you don't have to, continue emailing spreadsheets back and forth. You can just have that communication directly in Airtable. Similarly, our executives also care about how our projects roll up to our higher level business objectives. In this case, those are going to be tracked on that initiatives table. And so as we can see, it looks like we have 3 overall initiatives that we're focusing on for Q2 of 2019. First is to increase our quarterly revenue. Next is to align our teams across all of our projects. And last is to increase our overall brand awareness. Now, what we see is that we've actually linked our projects using that linked record that we talked about before to the specific objectives and initiatives that they roll up to. And here's where some of that ability to pass information between our tables really comes into play, because it now helps us understand a more holistic picture of how we're doing across our projects. So for example, let's say that we have our homeowner's guide, our business cards, and our pattern projects. Those projects are linked to the overall quarterly revenue goal. It looks like we can understand, what the overall budget is of those projects through a field like our Airtable's Rollup field. A Rollup field is essentially similar to a lookup, if you're familiar with lookups from spreadsheets, where we can say, take a look at all the projects that I've linked to my initiatives From those projects, show me the budget field that is on that projects table. And from those budgets, now we can do something additional, like add a summary calculation to say, I want to add up all of those budgets. So now per initiative, I can now understand what is the overall budget that we've allocated for each of these projects. Now, if I want to understand what the actual spend or the actual impact is, I can maybe do something similar. And in this case, we can say it looks like each project is overall averaging, around $27,000 by understanding, how projects match up to the overall budget that we've allocated. And, maybe in a certain case, we only wanted to allocate, a different amount. So let's say that we wanted to, have a certain level of spend. We can see something similar on the projects table where we could say, we only wanted to propose a certain amount. So now if something is over or under, we can now, again, see that in a very visual way. And so essentially for everyone at every level of visibility that they need, both for me as a project manager to see all the projects, all the tasks on my people's plates, for my direct reports, for them to understand what tasks are on their plate, which things are, upcoming to be due, which tasks are overdue, they have that visibility. And then for my executives, they can always stay up to date about, maybe how their initiatives are tracking or how the high level organization of their projects are tracking. So that covers, a lot of the essential functionality in the visibility that Airtable can provide. The next piece that we'll discuss is something that we've recently added to Airtable about a year ago, which we call blocks. And blocks are going to help us, again, add additional levels of visibility for each team that we have. And so blocks are essentially modular applications that you can add on top of the foundation of your Airtable base. And these help us translate the information from something like the grid or the calendar to maybe more visual reports, things like charts or pivot tables, where we can now start extracting additional insights from our teams. And so you can see that we have a variety of blocks here that Airtable has launched with, and these help us, again, extend the functionality of what we've created in Airtable. And so for me as the project manager, it's really helpful for me to see overall how many projects each of my teammates are working on. I've quickly color-coded these by whether these are internal or external projects. In another case, maybe it's helpful for me to understand a pivot table of the overall project impact to see how my teammates are spending their time. So in this case, it looks like Ari is spending the majority of her time on low impact projects. And so maybe for me as a manager, I can now start to understand, if this is trending in the wrong direction, maybe we need to keep Ari engaged in her work, make sure that she's working on more high impact projects, high leverage, to really take full advantage of all of the skills and talents that she has. Or maybe if I'm doing something like prioritization, and it's helpful to visualize my projects in more of a matrix where I can say on one axis, I have the overall project impact. On another axis, I have the overall project effort. And so in an ideal world, we have a lot of projects that are going to be low effort, but also high impact. And it looks like we have a variety of those here. So now as I'm triaging my work for my team, and I need to know, what I should be putting on people's plates, I can now maybe use something like this to my advantage to have that additional level of visibility that I need to fully understand what's going on in my business. Last, again, for my executives, for them, they might care a little bit more about, budgeting and how projects are tracking. And so you can see that I actually can create multiple dashboards for each person based on their own needs, similar to how you can create views of your table. So now for my executive dashboard, they need to understand for their initiatives how the overall budgets are going and which projects are over or under budget. And so we can see that for some of them, we have up to half of our projects are going to be over budget. So we might need to dive in a little bit deeper here to fully understand what's going on. And so again, the goal here is to understand that Airtable can help us organize all of our information in one easy place. Every stakeholder in our world can have their own view of that information, and every person can link the information across our different tables to make sure that everything stays up to date as it should. And so again, if I come to that initiative level and I open that up to kind of get a full picture of what's going on, I can not only see all the different attributes, but I can also start diving in and saying, oh, it looks like the homeowner's project is actually related here. This is the actual homeowner's record from that project's table. So again, any updates that I make to here, maybe I change the name, that update's going to be reflected everywhere else that record exists, again, because we updated the actual record as opposed to just some version or some copy of it. And so the lack of duplicative work, the ability to organize and customize this to be exactly what we want it to be, make whatever formulas we need to make to extract additional insights, those are going to be a lot of the benefits that we see from working with Airtable, where we can truly map our process to Airtable as opposed to Airtable determining what our process should be. And so there's definitely plenty more to show. One other thing that I think would be really helpful for a lot of our teams, if you think of a lot of the processes that lead into overall project management, some of them have to do with things like requests and request workflows. So even if we have a lot of external collaborators, the ability to use things like Airtable forms to be able to simplify our request process such that anytime somebody submits a new request, it can essentially funnel up into maybe like a project queue of overall just things that are in that initial stage. So anytime new projects get added, they automatically come into this queue. Then I know from my perspective as a project manager who I can assign them out to. And again, once I start doing that assignment, it can now come off of people's plates. So I think that, again, if you're looking for something where you can organize all of your projects, organize all of your tasks, how those roll up to the initiatives, and make sure that you can keep your teammates not screaming at you because we're putting too much on their plate, teams really find Airtable helpful because it can help them organize and visualize things for each person in whatever custom ways they'd like. And so if you have any additional questions from here, definitely feel free to check out Airtable. We'd be happy to assist. And really appreciate everybody from hopping in with us. So we'll be sending out some follow-up resources and to help us understand how you all enjoy today's webinar and where we can start making some improvements. So be on the lookout for that follow-up from here. Thank you all very much.